Okay, I think I've gone live. Although it's not showing the image on my second screen. Hmm. Let's see here. There we go. I think that'll do it. Okay, cool. Well, I've got the image up and I'm gonna vamp for a minute. Looks like we got our first viewer here. People should start to come in. Let's see here. Okay. Have to worry about getting some opening music by next time, maybe. Um, okay. So this is the second episode. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep track of episode numbers, but I guess I will at the start when it's easy. The second episode of the Worm review podcast we're doing here. Um, and we're covering two chapters a week. So this week is going to be 1.3 and 1.4. Um, Just gonna get right into it. 1.3. It's Taylor's first night out. She has her costume set and she's looking for trouble. It's after midnight and she's passing the high-end boardwalk area and she sees the Protectorate headquarters. She mentions that it has a force field generator and a missile defense system, which could sound like overkill, but in this setting it just feels practical. We also hear about the thriving businesses on the boardwalk that only cater to the richest of Brockton Bay and tourists. This is another indicator of the resources poured into some aspects of the city in comparison to what we see in the docks. Oh, and you know what? I do have another little thing to say. We've got the image here of Taylor's costume. This was supposed to be the image for episode two, or chapter two in the first episode of the show. So that you can see there, pretty good little costume on workbench. Then we've got this is the Protectorate headquarters in the background with the boardwalk, and this would be like Taylor running north to south on some morning. So yeah, that's the chapter three art of the Protectorate headquarters, but that of course is in the daytime. As she heads into the docks area, we get some backstory about Brockton Bay. It used to be a port town that had ships coming and going all the time, but the business slowed like it does for a lot of ports that are nearby other larger ports. When this happened, the wealth of the city stratified even further than before. The rich were getting richer, and the poor didn't have enough money or work to sustain them. The city mostly became a hub of tech and banking, leaving the working class areas near the docks dilapidated and dangerous. Taylor seems to have an unsympathetic view of the people in this area of the town at the moment. We'll see her attitude shift slowly over several arcs. I think by the midpoint of the story, she's much more sympathetic to the downtrodden people than she even is to sort of normal, well off people. Um, so it's an interesting transition. Um, and then the docks running out of work and leaving so many people jobless left ample opportunity for supervillains to get henchmen and prey on the newer specialized local economy. Here we can see that Worm acknowledges that for an area to be rampant with crime, there have to be material conditions that lead up to that state, showing the cause and effect of poverty and exploitation. I think the city has a great backstory that echoes real life events in many American cities. This buildup of villains in the city meant that the heroes also established a major presence here. Taylor estimates that Brockton Bay is one of the top 10 Cape cities, probably near the bottom. In America, that is, not in the world. The bigger cities I can think of from the story are New York, LA, Boston, Chicago, and then Austin, Texas. Capes are in many ways naturally drawn together to areas with other capes, so it makes sense that they would cluster and try and find a team or make a name for themselves. Um, well, Victoria says, I wonder if she can empathize with them more when she feels in power over them. Um, yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think it's just because she understands better, um, sort of what it took for them to get there, and she's seen so much of the harder aspects of life for like poor people and like the post disaster life and stuff like that. So she'll go through a lot of hardships. I think that's at least part of the reason why yeah, she's just more woke. Um, just 15-year-old girl has mostly been bullied. Other than that, does not have like a lot of life experience, and then like her after her running around like a you know vigilante-ish criminal. She's just got a different perspective. Um. Anyway, though, after getting to the docks, Taylor sneaks around in the dark until she sees someone light a cigarette. Noticing that the group of people she found are part of a local gang led by two supervillains, she decides to spy on them. Getting onto the roof of the building above them, she listens in on their leader, Lung. She hears his plan to shoot children and sees the guns amongst the crowd of gang members. She's in disbelief over what she's heard. We'll talk more about the scene as it unfolds in the next chapter. But the gang she sees is a local Asian gang. It has members from many different countries. Most gangs that are nationalistic or racial in nature are not as inclusive as this group, which she attributes to Lung being powerful enough to hold the group together. Lung is a pretty interesting character. We'll get to see him a bit here at the start of the story as the first cape that Taylor fights, as well as the first other cape she sees at all. Um, he did say to shoot the children. It's all there. Let's see the exact quote being, "The children, just shoot. Doesn't matter your aim, just shoot. You see one lying on the ground, shoot the little bitch twice more to be sure. We give them no chances to be clever or lucky. Understand?" Um, so that's that's the thing. Um, and then where was I? Yeah, he didn't mention to shoot the dogs, but he did mean it. Um, and then let's see here. Uh, Taylor tells us what she knows about his powers, but as she points out, she doesn't know if the information she got online was even accurate. She mentions the possibility that he may have a power that he hasn't revealed yet, or even a subtle power that can't be seen at work. This is a concept worth remembering, as information can be critical in cape fights. Many capes hide the true nature of their power to maintain an edge in combat. Um, yeah, the scene seems really cheesy without the future context, but it does all make sense within like two more chapters, so it's not that bad of a cliffhanger, I don't think. Um, but anyway, As far as Taylor knows, his power increases his capabilities as long as he's fighting. This encompasses several things, including growing armor plates, getting larger, and increasing his quick healing and pyrokinesis, both of which work on a very low level before he starts transforming, but increase as the fight continues. It's unclear to her if these powers have an upper limit. She speculates a few things like that his power might run off of adrenaline. She doesn't have a very good grasp of powers yet, so this is understandable. But powers have kind of a greater scope than she's imagining. Like, they run off a bigger power source than adrenaline. Um, and then, like, Lung wears a metal mask of an Eastern dragon's face and pants. That's his whole costume. He does have tattoos over a lot of his body, but that's not really a costume. Lung is kind of an asshole, but like he's awesome in as a bad guy because he's like an unstoppable dragon man. Um, okay, let's. Whoops, didn't mean to have a phone doing alerts into the mic. Um, he's named Lung after a type of dragon common in mythology in China. Most of the names in the book have significance in some way or another. Even when capes have ill thought out names, it at least gives us insight into the kind of person they are. It takes a special kind of weeb to name themselves Mystic Magic Impaler. And I skipped over Taylor's costume uh, before, but she made her costume out of bugs and spider webs, and she ends up looking like a bug with yellow bug eyes and mandibles. It's pretty great. Now, moving to the next chapter image, we see Lung mid-fight. Um, this chapter starts with Taylor still trying to roll things around in her head until they make sense. She realizes she doesn't have a way to call for outside help from the real heroes and thinks about the things she brought in her utility compartment. She really didn't think anything through about this first fight. An interesting item she has there is a set of EpiPens to use if she ever sends someone into anaphylactic shock, as well as pepper spray, which her dad gave her when she started her routine of morning runs. Unable to square the circle of why Lung would want to kill kids and running out of time, she decides the only action she can live with is to attack now and try and disrupt their plans. She could never be a bystander. Let's see here what people said. Um, Greg is defending Super Magic Dream Parade. Um, M says about the image, POV your Taylor, even though all of the chapter images for Arc 1 have been POV your Taylor. Um, let's see here. And Greg says 200 pages of detailed notes, no cell phone. Taylor, please. This chapter is much more action focused. We get to see how Taylor handles herself in her very first fight. I'll be talking about portions of the fight out of order to go more in depth on one aspect or another. This way, I won't have to talk about the whole fight in order, beat by beat, to talk about all the things I want to mention. Because of the low light conditions, she can't see her bugs to guide them, so she lets down some of the walls in her mind, allowing the positioning information for the bugs into her mind. We'll learn about this later, but Taylor is able to sense exactly where all the bugs under her control are in relation to herself and all the other bugs. This lets her get a very accurate idea of a given battlefield by coding the area in bugs and feeling where they can't go. She'll improve with this as time passes and be able to map things out and remember static things like walls and floors without having to maintain bugs over the area. She consciously holds back the venomous insects at the start of the fight, but after Lung uses pyrokinesis on her main swarm, she begins to use them to attack Lung directly. She mentions that his healing power should allow him to shrug off most venoms, whereas other gang members might go into anaphylaxis or suffer complications. Even though the fighting is just beginning, Lung's henchmen are mostly already defeated by her initial wave of bugs, then fully scattered when Lung starts using flames with little regard for nearby allies. At first, Lung is just using streams of fire to attack the swarm, but after she pulls a few tricks, he bursts flames in all directions. When she's still able to sting him in the eye a few times, he makes himself a living bonfire and doesn't let the effect down. Taylor is shocked to find he's not burned by his own flames, and struggles with questions about if he'll run out of oxygen or the fuel source for his power. While not all parahumans are immune to their own power, it's probably better to assume they will be. These kinds of things highlight her lack of experience in the field. She'll later become very adept at figuring out how to deal with other powers, but right now she's focusing on the wrong things and getting bogged down in the details that don't matter. Taylor feels a rush during the opening portions of the fight, almost accidentally laughing at first, then feels bad about reveling in hurting other people, then flips it around again and justifies that Lung has hurt and killed a lot of people, both directly and indirectly. I think she's feeling very powerful, and she had been feeling cowed and weak for so long. This is the first time she's really felt in control of a situation in a long time, possibly since before she got her powers. Either way, we get to see what will become a trend of acting, then finding a way to justify her actions later. Whether her justifications are valid or not can be talked about on a case by case basis, but she's a clever enough person that she can justify almost anything if given the chance. While all this has been happening, Lung has been growing, his armor plating coming out, metal hard enough that nothing she can do can get through it. She begins to notice that Lung is picking up steam, and despite all the venom that she injected him with earlier, when he sets himself completely on fire, she realizes she won't be able to hurt him anymore. Then his spine opens up, and a layer of armor plates go into place all down his back. At this point, she gets up to flee, but as soon as she takes a step, he hears her. She realizes it's too late that he gains. Or she realizes too late that he gains enhanced senses along with the rest of the advantages of the transformation. This is where we leave the chapter. He's more dangerous than he was at the start of the fight, and he knows where she is. Um, we'll later learn that the powers themselves want to be used, and more specifically, used in combat. Some people think that when Taylor almost laughs in this chapter, she's just feeling the effects of that for the first time and isn't used to it. I wanted to take a moment to highlight my favorite line of the chapter. I had to get creative. I had to get meaner. On a first read, this might just seem like a random throwaway line, but looking back on it with full knowledge, it's like summing up what the powers want in two short sentences. This is one of the many early lines that work in context but have even more meaning when you understand what the powers are and where they come from. I guess I have some final random thoughts on that chapter. I like the very first person that she fights has a hidden aspect to their power, with the enhanced senses being brought to the table. The fight is a good example of how regular people don't really have a lot of good options in a fight with a parahuman. They all have guns, but they don't even know where she is to shoot at her, so, like, a horde of people with guns can't really do much to most parahumans if they're kind of in their element. Because they all have a lot going for them. And then I think the fact that Taylor is already so conscious of glass explosions is funny. It's a great small piece of groundwork for later. Um, so now we get into our themes from today. We've got talking about bullying. Taylor couldn't be a bystander in a situation where she thinks Lung and the ABB are going to kill kids. Seeing a group of bullies, she immediately tries to intervene. There's also something of a reversal where Taylor self-describes as feeling a sadistic glee while organizing her attack on Lung. Yeah, I agree, Victoria. I like how conscientious she is as well, with both the glass explosions and remembering the EpiPens. She like thinks through situations. There are later times where she's always conscious of the idea that someone might vomit if they're in like a wounded or unconscious state. So she always makes sure people are like on their side and stuff. Um, and yeah, when people don't think of the things, as Victoria points out, she's like, "These idiots, gah." Um, oh Taylor. And then next here we've got our theme of conflict escalation. Lung's power is a great example of conflict escalation. Once he starts a fight, he continues to grow more powerful until there's no one left to defeat. Um, it's really it makes fights with Lung pretty all or nothing. Like beating him is very hard, and then he's will just get right back up if you don't do something about him. But um, yeah, she thought of the people with allergies, and I thought that was interesting too, having the EpiPens, because I think probably most people, including myself, wouldn't have necessarily thought of that, I guess. But it seems obvious once you do think of it. Anyway, and then Greg says about the conflict escalation. The line "I had to get creative, I had to get meaner" encapsulates that nicely. I agree. Yeah. Um, Vic says the first time Kaysen read this chapter, he was like, "Why the fuck is Lung so OP?" Lung has got pretty strong powers. But part of surviving in this world has to do with not upsetting the balances of power and getting too many people after you at once. But yes, he is so much stronger than her in certain ways. A lot of it is that she's not prepared. He does have like five powers going on. I think that it's mostly um due to like the changer aspect. Like I don't know for sure, but it seems like the changing is basically the only actual power, and all of those are just side perks. Um, and also like if somebody can really blitz him right off, they could probably actually kill him pretty easily, but they'd have to go all out at the start, not halfway through the start. Um, but anyway. So, the other theme that we had touched on the most here is class comparison. The book continues to casually spread in history of inequity in Brockton Bay and the conditions that actually led to the current state of things. Um, yeah, I agree. When you don't have the context of like what the powers kind of are and like how inexperienced she is, he can seem really overpowered. Um, Yeah, and the classifications do help the power understanding. I um I have stuff in the next episode ready for when the Tinker classification gets mentioned. Then I start describing each person. Like when I mention their power, I'll give a mention of what their power classification is. So um, that can probably help people start to sort of think of powers um, in a way that will fit the story, in a way that'll help them wrap their head around what's going on. Um, yes, so we've got only a couple minor hits in the glossary, not really much new, but I put in Cape City. Any city with a major Cape presence. Brockton Bay is near the bottom of the top 10 U.S. Cape cities. And then PHQ is the abbreviation for the Protectorate headquarters. Um, New characters. Oh, and while I'm talking about the new characters, if anybody has any questions about terms or anything that they think they want me to define, for clarity, then throw that out there. So new characters, we've got Lung. He's the first cape we meet aside from Taylor, and he's more dangerous than 50 people with guns. He is a really like proud individual. He is very once he sees someone as his enemy, he feels like he has to defeat them, especially if they have ever gotten one up on him, anything like that. Then he needs to settle the score. He needs to beat them to prove his supremacy. Um, we don't learn that about him here, but we will learn that about him in the future. Um, his costume, 6 feet tall, no shirt. Uh, that's quite a costume. He's got sprawling Eastern dragon tattoos from the neck down, and an ornate metal mask of a dragon's face. Um, let's see here. What are people saying? Um, do Cape Cities just occur like Hollywood? Like Cape City, or like Capes will just conglomerate in certain places. Yeah, it is kind of like that. Usually, like initially in like the golden age of parahumans, they would just go to like the biggest places to try and be like heroes against like unpowered criminals, and then there started being supervillains essentially. And with the rise of the villains, like a lot of them were going to places with money so that they could, take said money with crimes. And then the heroes would establish a presence in the same area. So it's like kind of fits into the escalation stuff where it's just an escalation of forces in given areas. Um, Mostly trying to stop like large scale crime rings and stuff. It's a lot easier to be a crim when you got all these superpowers. Does Lung's power have a cap, or can he essentially just get infinity strong as long as he doesn't faint or something? It has a cap to a certain point, but that cap is so like high that like Taylor wouldn't get to that point essentially. His We see in a flashback him essentially hit his power cap, so that's something to forever look forward to. Um, uh, and it's not like a for sure thing that that's the strongest he can get. It's just like he starts losing power after a certain point, so it seems as though it's the cap. Um, okay, so down to the power section for Lung. Lung can gradually transform while he's in a fight. This both changes his shape and increases the potency of all his other powers. He heals at a superhuman rate, gets enhanced senses, including sight and hearing, possibly more, gets stronger, tougher, bigger, and grows armor plating complete with claws. On top of all that, he's a pyrokinetic who can create flames. He's immune to his own flames, which he can also shape or intensify. Taylor doesn't know if there's an upper limit or extent of his transformation until there was no one left for him to fight. And then I put in the new characters, even though he was only mentioned, Oni Lee. Taylor calls him a scary sociopath. He hasn't shown up yet, but he was mentioned as Lung's flunky. His costume is a black bodysuit, a crimson Oni mask, like a Japanese demon, with 2 green stripes down either side, a leering ear-to-ear grin. His powers, he has a teleportation power that has a duplication aspect to it, but that is all that we know so far. And then I put in the new characters section the ABB, the AZN Bad Boys. The ABB is a gang held together by Lung. It includes members from many nationalities, which is uncommon, but speaks to Lung himself being so powerful and feared that he can keep them under his thumb. The ABB demands tribute from local Asian residents and forcefully recruits many people as well. Their gang colors are red and green, and they have at least 30 unpowered members and are led by two powered members, Lung and Oni Lee. These guys are considered major players on the east side of Brockton Bay. Um, then we've got our power knowledge and other world building information. I wanted to ask so people can type responses while I'm reading this next bit. What people think of Taylor's sort of easy inclination toward violence as she jumps into the fight. I always thought it seemed pretty natural, but some other people who have read this think she's very bloodthirsty. Um, but what are you gonna do? As we see with the first few capes we're introduced to after Taylor, the range of what powers can be is fairly wide. There's a guy who transforms into a metal dragon as a fight drags on, and a duplicating teleporter. We're going to see a huge variety of powers throughout the book. There's all sorts of different like types of powers, and even when two people have like the same core idea behind a power, like two people who are teleporters, there's always a trick to it. There's always something unique about each power, and it's sort of you can understand the character's power once you understand their personality a lot of the time, so you can figure out ways to fight a person, or you can just like figure out the really specific tricks to how their power like activates or works and try and exploit that. It's really like a system about characters trying to find loopholes in the powers because they're like fighting for their lives. And then let's see what the chat said. Oh, that's what Em was saying. That she seems to be going hog wild, like no holds barred. Um, uh, yeah, I suppose she's going a little hog wild. And yeah, Victoria's right. The term, the phrase "no holds barred" gets used a lot in Worm. It's such a long book that the like little tendencies that Wildbow had when he was writing it all come out, and you sort of see some phrases and stuff that he likes or that he forgot he used. So that kind of happens over time. Um, then Victoria says, I didn't think of anything when I first read it. I was shook when I heard other people be like, this seems kind of crazy and unrealistic. Oh, stream dropped? Oh. Um, can you hear me? Can you hear me again? Okay. Okay. Cool, cool. Don't know what happened there. But yeah, like I was saying, I don't think that Taylor's actions are like crazy or ignoble or anything. I think that like what she does is like reckless, but it's probably good. Oh no, another um spam bot, but this time Greg's a mod. He can totally wax him. Um, then M says, Victoria, to answer you, I was just going to say I think I don't fault her for it because she was scared, so maybe she defaulted to fighting tooth and nail. And then, as M points out, it was a Russian spy. Um, Victoria asks, what do you think would be a good decision for her? I'm just curious. And I mean, that's a good question too, because she didn't think through, like, she doesn't have the cell phone. She didn't, like, have a plan for what to actually do if she ran into trouble she couldn't handle, which, you know, and, M says not to go out alone in the first place. And, yeah, It's probably about right. Not having a hero team or whatever in this setting is pretty rough. Um, there's so many like different avenues of attack that you don't want to like go out with just one power. Let's see here. So, oh yeah, I wanted to talk a bit more about Taylor doubting stuff she found online. I thought that was pretty good, but I also like that they get information from online. Like they have a message board called Parahumans Online that we'll learn about pretty soon. That has compilations of like as much data as possible on every parahuman that they know about. Greg says, I do think she could have done better by taking out the goons and then running. Fighting Lung was the mistake. Yeah, yeah. If she had immediately, like, if she had been leaving as she started the attack, then I think she would have been fine. Um, and like later in the book, I think that she would have done that kind of thing, you know. But I just don't think. Uh, and Victoria says I would feel way worse attacking the civvies. Um, yeah, in a way, I understand that. Lung himself has personally done a lot more and at least partially press ganged a lot of these people. Um, so attacking him feels not as bad, but Greg's right in terms of like having a good plan would be to scatter all the guys, and then once Lung was alone, you know, during your attack, you just continue fleeing. And then whatever his plan was is probably disrupted because like if he bothered to get 25 guys together, then he probably wants them there, kind of thing. Um, uh, so I don't have a lot left on the script. I was trying to think up a discussion question, but didn't quite come up with one. Does anybody in the chat have a good idea for a discussion question for next time? Um, I'm admiring the artwork right now. I only saw it this morning. Oh, look at Long with his new metal spine. Uh, can't think of anything. Oof. Neither can I. Hmm. Yeah, these early chapters are super short. They're gonna get longer. Um. Uh. But it's a gradual process. So there's no like set point where they like get long. It's like just each chapter's mostly a little longer than the last ones. Except 2.1. Super small chapter, the smallest of all the chapters. Um, oh, we can talk for a second about the arc title, Genesis. It's or gestation. That's this one. Gestation. You know, she's just a little bug, and she's just gestating, and you know, just finally coming out of the little egg sac as a little pupa on the battlefield. It'll be a long time before she grows up into some sort of imago. Um, Victoria says that it's like how worms gestate. Um, is gestation when they're birthed? No, I think let me look it up. I think gestation is the like pregnancy basically. The process of carrying or being carried in the womb between conception and birth. So it's the descriptor for both like the mother and the child. But yeah, it's like in the womb, but also any other sort of egg sac like say that a pupa would live in. Um, you know, if one actually liked bugs. I always thought it was more of her power gestating. Yeah, no, I mean I agree. I think most of the arc titles you can spin them a lot of directions. I think he tried to go with like ones with a lot of multiple meanings. Um, her power is definitely gestating. She definitely has kind of just brought it forth for the very first time. I know she's done other stuff with it, but this is her first fight. Um, and then later on, it will be kind of the conception of her master plan. Yeah, that's kind of a gestation too. Um, let's see here. I don't know. Is there anything else? What is the next arc called? The next arc is called Insinuation. I wanted to double check I didn't have them out of order, but I think us who have read the story know more why it's called Insinuation. Um, but we'll talk about that when we get to arc 2. Does anybody have? We know what it's insinuating. Yes. Does anybody have any more questions or anything they want to ask or like talk about? Because otherwise, I'm probably going to end this as just a shorter episode. Looks like no. Yes, these are short chapters, Em. But it's good. It's like a little warm up at the start. Get some practice reps in. Well, okay. I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream. This was fun. See you guys next week. I'll post in the chat when we have information